Hey guys, it's time for another Coffee Talk with John. On the back deck, the sun is over here to my right. It is shining in. It's beautiful. I wanted to hop on and tell you a story. People have often asked me about my various trips overseas, and I wanted to share with you a story of it's a funny story. But I just wanted to share it because I think it's just a funny story. So, when I was in Egypt in the year 2000, I was traveling with a group of people who really wanted to see as many pyramids as they could possibly see. And I don't mean just the ones in Cairo, Giza. They wanted to go out into the desert to various places. And we went to one pyramid called Maidum. And that sounds like a terrible, terrible name to be going to, but it's not spelled my doom. It's spelled my doom, right? With a DHOUM or something like that. Anyway, it was a 3-hour drive into the desert, and in Egypt, when you're there, all of the archaeological sites are tourist attractions, basically. And you get there, and there's a little hut, and it's usually filled with a bunch of Egyptian men who are hoping that you'll tip them to be a tour guide, basically. And we so every time we'd go to a place, they'd come running out of their hut, and we'd usually tip them, and we'd go in and get cool tours, right? Well, we drove out to Maidum, and we're middle of nowhere, out in the countryside, middle of nowhere. And we pull into this compound, and there's this pyramid there. And we passed by this hut, and this hut was the size of a small garden shed. And 15 guys came out of that little building. It looked like a clown car. They were all coming out of this building. And we drove our car in. It was we hired a driver and a car for the day. And the driver was a lovely man. His name's Ali Al-Shazli. And we drive back by the pyramid, and they all come trotting over. And just as we're getting ready to park, on the back side of the compound, over the dune, comes a black military truck filled with guys with machine guns. Now, it had no markings on it, so we couldn't tell who these guys were at all. They were all in black uniforms, no markings, black truck, all carrying machine guns. And they came in, and they drove a circle around our car, and they parked directly in front of our car. And they all got out, and they stood there with their machine guns. Well, I'm a little ornery, and I was like, I just drove 3 hours out into the desert to see this pyramid. I'm gonna see this pyramid. So I opened up the door and I stepped out. And I stood up, and I was a head taller than all of the guys with the guns, and because I'm a fairly tall guy, I'm 6'1", but they were all short, and they're staring at me, and they're not giving me nice looks. They're like holding their guns and they're looking at me, and I'm like, and one of the Egyptian guys comes over, the people giving the tours, and he's like, he doesn't speak English, but he's like, right, and so I walked right past the guys with machine guns, ignored them. Walked right over. He took me right up into the pyramid of Maidum, and we got up in the pyramid, and we saw graffiti from when the pyramid was built up in the structure. We went up into the structure, like into the chambers above the main chamber. You could see how the roof was built, and it was amazing. It was an amazing time. We come out of the pyramid, and those guys with machine guns are standing there looking at me, and they're just not looking very pleasant. And I walk back towards the car, and the guy in front of me, he's like, and I said, okay. So I followed him, and he walked away from the pyramid, and he got right across a little ways. There was a mound of dirt on the ground. It was a good-sized hill, really. And he walks around the side of it. And I look behind me, and these guys with machine guns are walking up behind me. And now we're walking behind this hill, out of view. And these guys with machine guns are coming up behind me, and this guy in front of me is there. And he gets up in front of me, and there's a hole in the ground. And I look at him, I'm like, okay. And the guy who's leading me jumps in the hole. And he goes, so I look in the hole, and it's a tunnel. It goes down into the ground. So I jumped in the hole. And we're going down on a diagonal tunnel, going down into the ground. And we go down probably 20 feet into the ground. We're probably 20 feet under the surface of the ground. And the tunnel levels off, and there's a hole in the floor of the tunnel. And in the hole was a hand-built 2x4 ladder. And the guy climbs on the ladder, and he climbs down to the bottom, and he's at the bottom, he's going... And I climb on this ladder, and I climb all the way down to the bottom. And we get to the bottom, and now we're in another tunnel, but that's going straight. But you have to crawl because it's not a tall tunnel. So now we're crawling down this tunnel, and we come to a wall, and it's got a hole in the wall, and he goes through this hole. And I'm like, all right. So I go through the hole, and that hole, I'm going to be honest with you, that hole was as big as my stomach was around. I mean, I literally barely pushed through that hole. And I came into the room, and it was an amazing tomb. Sarcophagus. There were multiple sarcophagus. There was chambers. It was like all the walls were pristine. It was stunning. It was stunning. And the guy turns to me and he says, "Bakshish," which means tip, right? I gave him $20, which is like a month's salary for him. And he was like, overjoyed. I'm like, $20? Oh my God. Because I was like, you're showing me one of the most amazing things in my life I'm seeing right now. And we're all laughing and joking. And my other two friends followed me down the hole. And we're there and like this. And I'm like, okay, let's get out. So we climb back up. We climb up the ladder. We climb up the sloping ramp. We get all the way out to the top of the hole. I step out, and the guys with machine guns are standing there looking at me. Very unpleasant. And I'm like, I stood up, and I actively made myself taller. I was like, just wanted, to be a little bit more intimidating, I think. But I was like, I'm going to see these things. I drove 3 hours in the desert. I'm going to see these things. I walked back over to my driver, and he says, "How was that?" And I said, "Oh, it was amazing, Ali. It was incredible." And I said, "But let me ask you a question. Who are these guys with the machine guns?" He says, "Oh, them." He says, "They're here to protect you from the guy you went in the hole with." Supposedly, if those men who were Egyptian tourist police hadn't been there, we might have been mugged at the bottom of that hole. And they were there to protect us from the locals, basically. And then when we left the compound and we're driving away from my doom, we got about 5 miles away, and all of a sudden a black military truck pulls up beside us, and the passenger of the truck says, "Bakshish?" He asked for a tip. So it was an adventure. It was an adventure that I never would have had if I would have let my fear take advantage of me. It's an adventure I never would have experienced if I'd have said, "I'm afraid of these guys." It was an adventure. It was an experience of a lifetime. To experience being in that tomb and laughing and enjoying the time there and being amazed, so amazed. I gave the guy $20, right? I was like, "This is amazing," right? It was so worth it. It was so worth it. I guess my point really is when you succumb to fear, fear will succumb you. You will become enveloped by fear. But when you don't allow yourself to succumb to fear, is when you take action and you just decide you're doing things. You experience amazing things in life, but you don't have the opportunity to. if you let your fears stop you. So take this story as a funny story, but take it as a story of to live fearlessly, live joyfully, and look for adventures where you can see new cool things, and just love your life. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching. The John of New channel is solely funded by your generous donations and purchases of private readings and merchandise. To help out, go to johnofnew.com or use the donation link in the description below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.